Wiggy. Wiggy. Ugh. I am free in all the ways you are not. Yeah, I'm free to don a wig and retch the creativity out of me if that's what's justified and needed. I already intercepted my original rough planning with a dance cover of Cordis's Go, where I added in a ray gun style freestyle breaking sequence. This week, as a result, I'm gassed like Andrew Tate, the hands of Chase Demore. Am I laughing, gloating at his lack of skill? Oh, okay, we're going here. Last year, I actually defended Andrew Tate. The rare feminist who will do so, but selectively. I've often parsed people, controversial people, into parts and given credit for parts that maybe are admirable and blasted the parts that are problematic all the way to criminal. My oft-cited joke about this is Hitler would have made a good, great even architect. If you've ever searched up his art, he's famously rejected from art school, which is what Ricky Gervais, the comedian, posits is the reason for his subsequent extermination of the Jews. If only he had been accepted to art school, maybe would have averted disaster. I argue that maybe if he would accepted to architecture school, we could have averted disaster. But that's what I mean by humans are extremely complicated. Why do we default to historical figures, such controversial figures like Hitler, to make jokes? It's because it's to show that there's nothing in this world that's a slam dunk. And once you think you've had a slam dunk, you're probably suffering from a certain amount of cognitive bias. Despite the disagreements that I have with, say, a Jordan Peterson, I agree with him that the line between good and evil runs through every human's heart. Because we present in certain ways to the world, we often present what Chris Rock affectionately calls the representative. The representative is who you think other people will admire, respect, fall in love with. I've tried to live a life counter to that, which is leading with authenticity. Though for Andrew Tate, I actually gave him credit for his combat sports career. He's a previous elite level kickboxer. I understand why he uses the title world champion, because his organization, ISKA, that's what they call it. But more accurately, I'd call him the equivalent of G League to NBA. A world champion in kickboxing would be someone like Alex Pereira in the UFC, who's now won belts in mixed martial arts, multiple weight classes. Andrew Tate is elite level, but at, again, what I would consider to be the G League. Glory K1 are the NBA of kickboxing, and ISK is like the G League. Now, to be respectful, ISKA has produced a number of notable martial artists, including one Javier Mendez of American Kickboxing, aka. AKA has produced many, many UFC champions. Cain Velasquez, Daniel Cormier, Luke Rockhold, Habib Nurmagomedov, and Islam Makhachev. So, I've often wondered why Andrew Tate never mentions Javier Mendez, because I think that would be a way for him to defend the fact that he's an elite level athlete, as opposed to this Jekyll and Hyde conversation that occurs where some people argue that he ain't shit and he never was shit, and some people argue that he's the best mixed martial artist to ever martial art. The truth is somewhere in the middle. Credit to him for being older and stepping back into the ring. But from what I watched, the excuses were that he gassed, and that excuse in martial arts has always bothered me, because strength and conditioning is a skill of the sport. Okay? What's the point in wishing for something that never happened, or wishing for skill sets that you never had? It's like wishing that you had better hands as a boxer. This is part of the sport. He's also acting as if whoever he fought, Chase Moore, was like an Anthony Joshua. No. Chase Moore is an athletic man who played football at one point. It's now switched over to boxing. But I think it's extremely questionable to represent Chase Moore as an Anthony Joshua level boxer. It's just night and day, apples to oranges. In some respects, for somebody like Tate, who's often talking shit about being accountable, being the top G, he has a lot of excuses. My premise for him has always been, like for anyone else, you as a person have to be discerning in the knowledge that you absorb from anyone. Maybe Tate is articulate for a combat sports artist, but that means nothing about whether he should teach you about how to be an alpha man. As a tangent, The science on quote-unquote alpha males has been oft misquoted. In fact, many of the original researchers who helped to evolve and coin the term, the most recent being primatologist Franz de Waal, offered a more complete definition in which the alpha male of, let's say, a chimpanzee troop often displayed progressive attitudes such as supporting weaker members of the group and other acts that we would consider more progressive if you were to map them onto human behavior. Of course, because people co-opt terms, never heard Andrew Tate addressing that. He just takes the term, spins it how he wants, and as anyone who is persuasive, offers some doses of truth along with wild, wild speculation. Even if I were to agree with the evolutionary biology and psychology that Andrew Tate, Neil Strauss, Rollo Tomassi, and other of the pickup artists and red pillars have been explaining since rules of the game, the conclusion can be wildly different. Even if we agree on the base set of facts, I've asserted that biology is simply describing what is. To this point, biology never prescribes what should be. Okay. Evolutionary biology, psychology, at least up to this point, is a largely non-thinking, non-feeling process that just happened by accident. There's no conscious thought process. What we do is we take a look, or at least I do, at all of the emerging evolutionary biology, psychology, and neuroscience to actively question, am I me or am I a biological and cultural construct? Okay. What is the answer to that question? I have no clue. Or I have some clues, which is the humility to admit that I have none. Or I have some, or I have none. The problem with analyzing the subconscious mind is subconscious is subconscious for a reason. But I think I'm uniquely suited because I have none of the biological, overwhelmingly seductive impulses that many, many people fall victim to. As I mentioned many vlogs in a row, I never fell under the illusory biological and cultural constructs that I must be a married mother. I'm doing none of those things. In fact, I'm an antinatalist, child-free woman who will remain single the rest of her life. That's definitely the right choice for me. I'd argue, at the very least, that being antinatalist and child-free is the moral choice because you never ask whether you have permission for the person you birth to be here on a world, on a planet that's rife and full of suffering, death. Okay. Why I have such a strong relationship with my mother is that I approached her preteen to actually summarize those feelings maybe with less finesse than now, but with just as much vigor. Hey, Mom, I resent you for having me without my consent. To her credit, my mom heard me, internalized the ideas, and after thought on her end, responded with, I'm sorry. You're actually right. I never asked you. And because you're honest with me, I'll be honest with you. Maybe it's cold comfort, but I was too weak, and society tricked me. Childbirth is so much more difficult than what people give credit for. I almost died having you, and you almost died. Then, being a mother is infinitely more difficult than carrying a child. My nights have been wrought with fear, paranoia, and this has nothing to do with how you turned out. In fact, I probably could have never asked for someone better, in a sense that I never had to worry about you doing anything except excelling at academics and whatever you set your mind to. I never worried about boys, drugs, anything that would take another type of person off the path. So what I'm revealing to you is what I consider the nature of life. I'm so happy that you've come to your own conclusions about this life, and I fully support what you decide. I already can tell that you're in the single woman direction, no marriage, no kids. I support you, and whatever I can do to help you on that journey, I will. Because I owe you. I never asked you if you wanted to be on this suffering world, and here you are. The best I can do is provide you the infrastructure to do whatever you can on this earth, this planet. No, I ain't shoving you back into my womb, and I doubt you're in a position that you want to take yourself out, right? Well, that's true. This is largely on us sharing research on Albert Camus, the existentialist philosopher, was greatly influential in helping us essentially detether and detach from what biological, cultural expectations were and completely chart our own path. That charted path has been difficult because there's, as I've complained, but lovingly, no template for what we're doing here. There's just been a lot of following threads, interests. My problem has been that I excel and then switch tracks so easily. The number of careers and high salary jobs I've walked away from been atrocious, right? I studied electrical engineering. I was a research academic. I was a project accountant after being a C-suite at a startup. Then I started my own business, technical writing, marketing writing. Finally, I realized the best would be to just return home to the family business. That's always been the backbone since I've been preteen, and finished off my career there. Those preteen years when we started the business were a fraught time. I was suffering from back pain due to my extreme focus on all of my pursuits. I let that go on for too long, and if my mom did make a major mistake in parenting me, she also let it go on for too long. The difference between me and others is I hashed it out. I expressed my disappointment in her negligence and poor judgment. I realized that this is something so difficult to achieve because in listening to many multimillionaires, billionaires, I realized in bits and pieces that I've achieved what they were never able to achieve. If you listen to Chamath Palihapitiya or Will Smith, despite all of their fame and their fortune, they were never able to address their parents with the same sense of authenticity that I've been able to. I credit my mom and me for that, for me willing to be open with her and her willing to be open with me. In fact, all of my professional success I'd attribute to my authenticity. All of my artistic success, too, I attribute to my authenticity. So when I've come back to some fundamental principles, I'm challenging them in a way that's authentic to me. In detailing my life, I've mentioned before, for example, as somebody who's adventure traveled to 122 countries and lived amongst wild animals across all natural harsh environments, from the Amazon jungle to the African savanna, from Galapagos marine iguanas to Mauritian sperm whales. I've lived a life for the ages. Again, even just the way I execute adventure is what some rich influencers were arguing that they'd want to do. The experiment I use is, who would you trade lives with, and would other trade lives with you? My answer has always been, I can think of nobody in the world that I'd actually want to trade lives with. But I've been approached all the time by people who would willingly trade their life for mine. That's one of the winningest definitions if you've ever heard one. So normal people all the way up to some surprising people have commented to me that they would exchange with me. Multimillionaire and billionaires have claimed that they still struggle with the ghost of their parents. To give context, for example, Chamath, Palihapitiya, and Will Smith's dads are dead. So whatever they never addressed is forever buried with those bodies. I had the foresight to just lean into being free. That's why I choose myself, because I know nobody who has developed such a strong knowing of themselves. And inviting anybody into my world actually represents a large risk for me, where there's a lot less risk for them. How do I explain it in a way that makes sense? Okay. Slutty Sundaes, I've come up with a new approach, and the new approach is to introduce my mom as a character. My mom replaces the previous you character, which was me and my creative muse externalized as a person. In that, I had 3 themes: playboying, Mark Wahlberging, and colonizing, that I wanted to address in one-shots that are a continuation of my previous Slutty Sunday series I released in 2017. Okay. The best way for me to avoid a bloated Axl Rose failed Chinese democracy album project is to just ride the wave of creativity the way that makes sense, including vlogging outside with a wig. Why is that the most effective method? I have no clue, but it is what it is, and I no longer challenge what works. Instead, I go with what works until I realize that I need to do something different. Okay. Last week, I addressed playboying. This week, I might address both Mark Wahlberging and colonizing. But these two are also the more complicated. We are delving into race, biology, but can we do it in a funny and academically neutral way? I almost use the word rigorous, but I have to remind myself I am simply making art, and art is different than academia. Maybe academically genuine? No. Actually, no, none of that. Because that's in direct competition with being an artist. So fuck that shit. Fuck that I even mentioned academic rigor, integrity, whatever words. Fuck that. This is just about creating in pure art. So, I've addressed this several vlogs in a row, but it's relevant because the entire premise of why I am the way I am rests on time efficiency and risk reward analysis, doing that the right way. To add, I'll have to do some more in-depth research. But from what I've always known from the literature, what has borne out in my own experience, I'll lay out the ways that men and women can orgasm and where there's upside benefit for men that never exists for women. Again, anything that I mention or anyone mentions is always subject to fact checking. One of the first assertions of my enriched English elementary teacher was question everything. You must be certain that facts are facts, otherwise you're a puppet to whoever is parroting the facts to you. Does that make your responsibility extremely high? Yes. I took that to the extreme. In fact, any physics or mathematics formula that most other children just accepted as fact, I derived from axiom or original experiment to the equation. I test these things myself rigorously. Though from research, I've gleaned that for women, orgasming by themselves or with a male partner have roughly the same physical benefits in terms of the chemicals that a woman releases in her body and other positive benefits. The only situation where there might be a clear upside is if she is having sex with someone she loves. And that's a maybe. For men, they have a clear upside in terms of their physical response, the chemicals released, having a female partner, whether they love her or not. Though that biology is interesting and serves to identify an asymmetry. And this is where sometimes I think the red pillars and other such manosphere confuse. Okay. They often exploit sex differences in order for them to gain what they want to gain out of the experience. Here's the point. As women, you should be equally educated on these differences. I knew this even intuitively as a child. I mentioned a couple vlogs ago that even as early as grade 1, there was, I'll call him a misguided boy because he was still young, touching girls down there in front of a classroom and in front of a teacher. He, as far as I know, was never reprimanded for this. But the difference in how I thought and other girls thought was apparent even at such a young age. In fact, one of the girls that he often touched more than others, I encountered at a grocery store. This is coming off the fact that I myself discovered masturbation right before grade 1 by accident when rubbing up on some furniture. Yes, I orgasmed but without this terminology to know what I was doing, I called it the tickle of truth. My mom, progressive feminist gangster that she is, recognized what was happening, and instead of discouraging me, just encouraged me to do it in private by myself. So by the time I was in grade 1, I knew that touching down there is something you do for yourself. So why was this little boy touching girls down there? I asked the girl that he touches most. She seemed taken aback by this because maybe nobody had addressed it to her clearly. I asserted, you can touch yourself. That's what I do. Just wondering whether that might be a better option for you. Just throwing it out there. Her answer was something akin to, I like it that he likes me. Okay, that's one of my earliest remembered indications I'm different than all these basic bitches. They're out here, I have no clue, being overcome already in grade 1 by these feelings of wanting to be liked. That's why I've never felt moved to do any of this with men. Sticking a dick in my holes, yes, I'm the holy virgin, which means I've never taken a dick to my vagina, anus, or mouth. Now I realize too, because I've mentioned that I could also be interested in Asian women, well, how do you change the definition given that women or lesbians could never then therefore lose their virginity? Well, from what I understand, at least in the dictionary, they have no definition of what that would be, nor would I conceivably have done that either. The point is, so then let's say if you move to an orgasm metric instead, have you orgasmed with others? In the presence of them, have you caused them to orgasm and have they caused you? Then by that definition, yes. What does that mean though? Why do I insist on right up to sex adjacent, but never crossing over? Because as I mentioned from before, the math ain't mathin' when it comes to penis in holes sex. Okay. The act on its own, from a biological and even cultural standpoint, asymmetrically rewards them. Okay. If you talk about the risks, they're heavy on women. Pregnancy being the biggest STD, given that I'm antinatalist and child-free, along with the other diseases, along with the psychological mindset, mental health, and other problems that could occur. Now, having been me in my brain for a long time, I suspected, and I think it's largely true, that I'm able to handle casual kink or casual sex adjacent in a way that other women probably lack the brain chemistry to do. But how do I know this about myself? Because this is a whole lifetime of me knowing and testing heavily in that direction. When I was switching careers, from being an engineer and research academic to a designated accountant, some headhunters and recruiters type you to discern whether you're a match for example, the C-suite job as a CFO or as a project accountant, I consistently tested that I should be an engineer. I am an ENTP 7 wing 8 Myers-Briggs personality type enneagram. That's extremely rare for a woman to be. So all of my leading indicators pointed in the direction that I'm an atypical woman and probably more skewed brain chemistry wise to male, because I also have a lot of traditionally male interests. I consistently watch combat sports, play guitar, listen to rock music. How do you think I could do such an in-depth analysis on an Andrew Tate despite being a feminist? Why would I even take the time? Because I actually am interested. I already would have done these things regardless. I've listened to first half of Demetrius Johnson's breakdown of Andrew Tate's fights. That's actually how I watch fights. I watch other fighters break down fighters. I have an intuitive sense of what I would conclude from my own fight knowledge. Then I'll defer to someone like a pound for pound great, DJ, to do his fight breakdowns, or Israel Adesanya also does breakdowns. So then, I mean, if a DJ is concurring that at the very least the Tates are elite level athletes, if not world champions, then okay, on point. I agree, they agree. But in any case, the point being is that I made the hypothesis the correct hypothesis, that I can actually have casual kink without developing feels, catching feels, if you will. And that's largely borne out. It's actually the number one question I'm asked is, have I ever caught feelings for anybody in the traditional romantic or sexual sense? I answered last time, the closest that I've ever been turned out that he was a creative muse rather than anything traditionally sexual or romantic. Again, though, that took many years of me reviewing myself, knowing myself, studying the neuroscience and all related aspects for me to come to that conclusion. I'm almost guaranteeing you that a lot of people confuse feelings together that should be teased apart. In fact, I will assert in my many years of dealing, quote unquote, with people, very few people have the suitability to be romantically partnered with their quote unquote soulmate for life. I think that's so rare in actuality that for people to still be aiming for this is comical. I mean, you can waste your time aiming for it if you want, but I'd almost suggest that you do something better with your life. Something more practical, something that might make you happier, instead of always investing all of your time into the situation. That's why I think I've often related to people in a much deeper way than they otherwise relate to other people, because the sexual perspective, romantic perspective, absolutely clouds people's minds and prevents them from viewing the world objectively, viewing themselves objectively, and viewing others objectively. So, back to Mark Wahlberg again. I mentioned him before, and I'll mention him again. I'm still afraid of him. I'm still fearful of him. My mom, overall, is probably a progressive parent, but she also made many questionable choices. Mentioned before that because she was one of the first classes of professional people of color in the government. She suffered from a lot of racism and misogyny. You're talking about the 70s and 80s in Canada as a Hong Kong immigrant with a university degree and a designated accountant certificate. Her white male boss did all sorts of nefarious acts to fuck with her career after she rebuffed his romantic advances. Despite them both being married to other people. So, my mom, as I explained before, lost her shit on white men and declared that I shall never be with one. That opened up the door for me to counter with, trust me, I ain't gonna be with a white man or any other man. I'm good. I'm candy coated, dude. I'm too busy, too talented, too interested in other things to waste and dilute my time with wastes of time. Her methods were quite extreme, and they included sequestering me around the few Asians that she could find in Edmonton, where I was born. I mean, maybe there's a joke about Hong Kongese, ethnically Chinese people. Why were they all boys? But they did happen to be all boys. And eight of them, in fact, versus 2 girls. I idolized these Asian boys because they were the cool kids that you never see in Hollywood. None of these William Hung tropes. They were more like the charismatic versions of Jackie Chan. A lot of them did high school sports, martial arts, played pool. In fact, a lot of my original sports enthusiasm was fostered them. I mean, I was always small compared to them, and there was a larger age gap, so I often got thrown around, wrestled around. They would play shit testing games with me because they were that much older. You nerd, I heard your mom bragging that you're reading 5 grade levels above, which was exactly our age gap. So I, at 5 years younger, was apparently reading at the same grade level that they were. Oh, you nerd. Okay, fine. I'm going to test you. Read this book. Tell me what it was about. They would also make these little games and challenges to test me because they were on the leading edge of playing computer games. I was like, what is this computer game? I want to come in. Nerd, get out of here. Come on, I want to play too. Okay, tell me a joke. And if I laugh, maybe I'll let you in. At the time, I was wearing a little gold skirt. My mom was dressing me in these little princess outfits, and sometimes quite scandalous ones. At the time, I think, Decent Proposal? No. What's the one with Sharon Stone? Where she crosses her leg? Basic Instinct? Basic Instinct, that's it, right? Oh, I was wearing a Basic Instinct-like skirt. I just did a ballerina kick across their face. It's like, I'm Sharon Stone. They laughed, so I entered and played video games. That's where I developed all of my roasty comedy style. If you just think of me like a bro, a feminist bro, that's how you can best characterize my personality. As that, I'd often been exposed to that type of confident, charismatic Asian boy / man. A lot of them had much better nutrition than the quote-unquote homeland. Tall, ripped, athletic, smart. So that's why I have come to a question with regards to what this all means. My mom stacked many different methodologies on top of socializing me to Asian boys. She also showed me questionable films in my preteen days. 96 was a big year. That was the year of Fear and Scream. Fear starring Mark Wahlberg and Scream starring Nev Campbell and Skeet Ulrich. I never mentioned Scream last time because Skeet Ulrich never became the actor that Mark Wahlberg became, plastered all over the place. But these were exactly the kind of people that I and most other people are afraid of. My mom always been insistent on me watching these movies because she wanted to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt white men stupid and incompetent but also psychos. And those movies did white men no favors. Mark Wahlberg is an absolute nut in Fear. He beats people up, kills people, tattoos himself, kills a dog. I know people laugh. Is that the worst thing he did in a movie? Because he fucking killed people in that movie. But yeah, the dog was an iconic scene because there's a dog door in Reese Witherspoon's childhood home, and they stick in the dog head partially as if it's alive and then splat onto the floor a decapitated dog head. I mean, that as an animal lover, that killed me. That was just as sad as the scene in Marley and Me where they euthanize Marley. That's why I've never recovered, because Mark Wahlberg is an absolute psycho in that movie. And I was, oh my god, the worst case scenario is to run into a Mark Wahlberg or Skeet Ulrich like character. Skeet Ulrich in Scream also turns out to be a violent murderer. To be fair, the stats, at least in North America, prove out that a lot of violent crimes are committed by thems. So that was enough for me to think twice about my interactions. And I actually never really realized how much that original upbringing affected my interactions, because while I shared a lot of hobbies with white men, I just never even thought about them at all, really. Aside from admiring their talents as martial artists and musicians. But a scene in Fear with Mark Wahlberg has always caused me pause. Him and Reese Witherspoon are on a roller coaster. This is when he's quote unquote chasing her before he is revealed to be a psycho. They're riding a roller coaster and she guides his hand under her skirt. The implication being that he fingers her on the roller coaster. That scene, though, is so masterfully shot that most people who know of Mark Wahlberg and Reese Witherspoon in their younger, earlier careers refer to that scene. My dad even had that scene as part of his VHS porn stash. So imagine my surprise when I came across it. Yes, I stole his porn and watched it on VCR. So, why I have a topic headline called Mark Wahlberging is because many, many, many years later, when I became a grown ass woman into kink and fetish, but never dick in holes sex, I encountered my own Mark Wahlberg esque style moment. Okay. How did this happen? Quite honestly, I have no clue how it happened. This weaves into my extremely complicated relationship with white men. I never even knew that I might be physically attracted to them until I started attending kink fetish events. As I mentioned before, I had an extremely egalitarian approach to them. Comp sci, first in, first out, FIFO. If you requested me, I would oblige because I wanted to experience. I never announced that this was the case, and this is no longer the case. But when I was in that pure say yes to everything point of view, I quickly had more requests than I had time for. I mean, that could have been an obvious answer, but I had never done anything before, so I just let it ride this way and let it be that way. Now, all right. So, in say yes to anything approach, many different types of people approach me. I said Asian men, women, different races. And given that I never approached anybody else, it's really hard for me to ascertain exactly what was going on. But because time became a limiting factor, I had to face a question when I had the time to breathe to myself. If I'm going to continue to do this, I clearly have to choose. Choose, in a sense, know what I like so that I can reject if I need to based on time constraints. Why is there so much traffic suddenly? I have no clue, but okay, anyways, I'm continuing on. So, given that I had said yes to everything, I had a good sampling of all different sorts and sizes, right? Types, this and that. And if I were to be honest with myself, I had two types: Asian women and handsome, ripped, tall men, who, in the second category, were all white. Now, if they was it race related? No, because for example, given the fight game, a lot of ladies have been swooning over Anthony Joshua. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Anthony Joshua totally would be my type. Rick Fox would also be my type, and they're both black men. So I think it's more the tall, ripped, and handsome rather than the race, but all of them that I encountered happen to be white. So then we're going to come to this obvious question that everyone else would be like, well, clearly, I mean, it's obvious, but I have still been questioning it. So you're telling me that you're attracted to tall, ripped, handsome men. Okay. And your question is what? That's obvious that you should be. My question is it obvious that it should be? Why? Why is that obvious? I mean, yes, you look at an Anthony Joshua and you're like, clearly, if I recall his stats off the top of my head, he's 6'6", ripped to shreds, handsome as hell. My knock against him is that he has children. But a lot of women would be like, who the fuck cares about that? To me, it's a deal breaker. That's why It just a no to me. Before, when I've kinked with people, I've done it with people who had kids, but if you were to ask me today, now, I'd be like, no, thank you. I'm convinced of my antinatalism and child free lifestyle to the point where I would never even kink with somebody on a one night, one off if they had kids. In fact, I've had some people that I've kinked with before who try to reestablish contact with me and in the interceding time had kids. I would just blank you out. I would block and move on. I tried to be opening and generous with somebody who then just completely disregarded boundaries for me and for their own kids. They asked me to be in contact with me again, assuring that there's nothing sexual, romantic, kink related, because I had warned them, if it goes in that direction, go fuck yourself, dude. You're a dad. I, I have no idea what you think I'm doing with you here, but go be a fucking dad. If you had to make that bad choice already, go fucking be a dad. There's nothing here for me to gain from interacting with you. And if you want to be friends, as you claim that you just want to be, I'll give you one chance. But if you take it in this direction, it is over. Guess what? He took it in that direction almost immediately. So I was like, lights out. We're done. We're finished. We're finished. So I'm actually quite hardline on this now. I just have no interest at all in men with kids, men with partners that are closed. As in, if you have an open relationship, I might consider it, but if it's closed, nope. You ask me to stick your dick in my holes, it's nope. I'm strict on my boundaries because I've come at those boundaries with a lot of thought, calculating what I want as a person out of these arrangements. What I found about a lot of women is they seem extremely deferential, even though penis in your holes sometimes does very little for them when they've confided in me. They'll still do it because they want to feel loved. That's the number one reason I'm anecdotally told. And my counter to them, and I try to be real with people, if you think that sticking a dick in a hole is love, you have to do some work on yourself to know whether you love yourself first. I think that whatever love you think dick in your hole is going to solve, you need to have solved that yourself first. And then once you solve it yourself, you'll realize that you don't need the dick, and then maybe you'll want it, but you don't need it. Then that's a completely other question. So when I have been busy sorting myself out, okay, what kind of men do I like? What's going on here? Brought it these habits on the road, and I'm couch surfing. Again, I had completely no control over this, but someone did have control to kibosh everything. That was my mom. I mentioned before that my mom, given her extensive government audit background, and then subsequently our family business, developed control systems for many different applications. So this was one where she applied her talents. Some of the techniques that she used is background checking couch surfing hosts, contacting them personally. Hi, thanks for hosting my daughter. And whatever she did and whatever I did was mostly successful because I've actually never run into a man who's forcefully, disrespectfully tried to penetrate my boundaries. Yeah, play on words. My boundary is your dick has to stay out of my vagina, anus, and mouth. Anything else we can negotiate. That is a firm boundary. It's an absolute no. People are actually really shocked, given some of the wild shit that I've done, that that men have never tested my boundaries in that way. That's because I think freeing them from the typical norm, the basic bitch sex, they can do other things that they maybe never even conceived of, conceptualized before. Actually, one of the most dangerous was a Mark Wahlberg situation. But okay, good guy, never turned out to be a psycho, whatever. But he was a professional motorbike rider. Okay, and before people are like, who, nobody you would know. He was just that skilled in riding a motorbike. I knew because I've actually never ridden a motorbike myself. That was probably the first time that I was passenger on a motorbike for such an extended period of time. I might have been a passenger every once in a while when you're in Southeast Asia on smaller bikes or in the Dominican Republic on a moto taxi, but I had never ridden passenger on a motorbike for more than maybe 15 minutes at a time. So when he picked me up as my host on his bike, I was like, okay, well, I guess this is going to be how we travel around, how we do this. Sure. One thing I noticed, clearly he's masterful on his bike. We were weaving through traffic. Would I call it dangerously fast? Faster than I think most normal people would ride. But I did think that he was technically good enough to do it. As in, okay, you know the background that he rides motorbikes professionally. Then you're riding with him as a passenger and you feel comfortable and confident, even though he's maybe objectively doing things that other less skilled riders would never do. Clearly, he's more confident and competent, so he would weave through traffic in a way that other riders maybe never would. I did always feel safe riding passenger. That sets up why whatever eventually happened. Mark Wahlberg style, right? We were ripping along a highway. A lot of clearance between us and other people. Suddenly he reached his hand back, one-handed riding the bike. Okay. Where did he reach his other hand? He actually reached his other hand behind his back to finger me while he was maneuvering the bike down a highway. I let it happen too. And whatever happened after that was exactly Reese Witherspoon's reaction, except the difference would be Reese Witherspoon guided Mark Wahlberg's hand while I just allowed whatever biker wanted to do. Because I have no clue exactly what I'm supposed to do, but he clearly wanted to do this, and I was okay with him doing it as long as he can make the judgment that he can maneuver a bike and do this, keeping us both alive. I had to ascertain that he wants to stay alive and still adventure and do all the shit, right? And he's suicidal. So that happened, and I think given the adrenaline, just fucking high octane situation, the level of danger that still could happen, was one of the hottest orgasms I've ever had. Just straight up. So after we arrive at our destination, his first excited comment jumping off the bike because I've never done that before. Okay. I wish I would have known that. Maybe you should have practiced on another person before risking our lives. I've since told this story to other friends of mine who ride motorbikes and are in the kink community. They agreed that that's probably one of the more dangerous or most dangerous interactions that they've ever heard of. But that's something that I never even thought to ask for. So when people are like, well, so you talk about how you want these interactions, you're going to take his dick away from your holes, so take some of his tools away. Well, then, is it all about you? No, actually. I just turn it right back on my kink partners and ask them, what's your fantasy? Aside from sticking your dick in holes. And often they actually have something quite clear, cut, and formed, and we'll just try to make it happen. I've never refused a request, and it's been a lot of fun because I'm quite open to whatever happening to happen, but sometimes it's extremely hard to even conceive what could be. This motorbike Mark Wahlberg incident is something that people just feel in the moment that they do based on vibe. Because this is the interesting thing about me. The scientist in me, the neuroscientist, the psychologist, all amateur, I immediately try to pick his brain, just like I do with all my kink partners. It's equal parts kinking and just brain analyzing. Okay, so you've never done that before. What made you want to try with me? And this is more curiosity than accusatory, which I think he sensed as well. And you just explained to me that what I was feeling a vibe from you, your body language. First of all, very few people know how to ride passenger well. It's the first thing he noticed about me. Even though I've never been on a bike for an extended period of time, through other body trainings like martial arts, dance, and other situations, I know my body well. One thing that he could feel is I was moving my body extremely well with his to allow him to maneuver when we were weaving through traffic. His specific examples were a lot of people have no idea that when, for example, you're turning left or right, you gotta go with the rider left or right. Apparently, there's a bunch of jokers out there who, let's say he's leaning left, will go right on their body. I'm like, are you all stupid? Like, that's just basic body mechanics, physics. I've often been accused of being an intellectual snob. Maybe I am, but I think these things are basic. Apparently, they ain't basic. Because imagine for as long as he's been riding a bike professionally, he's encountered more dummies than smarties, if you will. In fact, he's like, of all the people who've ever rode passenger on his bike, he felt my body the most in sync with him, which is why he decided to do what he did. Okay, that's interesting data. That's interesting feedback. And here's where I'm obviously different than other people. Especially women have asked me, okay, so this dude is telling you that he feels your body is more in tune with him than he's ever felt before. That you should have married him? No, oh, come on. Are you? Okay. This is what I mean by building confidence from inside out. I can only comment on me. because I've only lived in my own body and my own experience. I have no idea if you can do it as an overweight, out of shape, zero achievement, basement dwelling troll. Okay? I have no idea whether it's possible to do. I'm confident in myself and I love myself because I've done it all. I've A+ efforted everything and I've had remarkable success across many domains, even some hobby domains like dance. I'm the Kinja I've always wanted to be. And as a side note, that's the type of Asian man that I admire a lot. If people are ever curious, is basically like a Kinja, right? Or actually, the members of Cordis are quite attractive too. Just like hip hop dancers. Yeah. In any case, why these kinds of compliments never swoon my heart is because at the basis, I already believe they're true. So whether other people co-sign on it, the most important is my own belief. For example, my vlogging, my art is a one-way push into the ether with no regards to how people receive my art. In fact, I usually vlog, art, roam away for a bit, and if I come back and I check stats just for fun, a lot of my art's been ratioed, especially Slutty Sundaes, despite being one of my highest viewed contiguous series. Tons of ratioing has happened. I'm like, okay, well, the thing is that art is subjective. I make jokes for my own laughs. Number one, if I laugh, that's a win. If other people laugh, okay, but me laughing is a win. I vlog, I write, I dance, I sing, I play guitar. If I entertained myself, that's all I need. I've done it. Now, oh yeah, whatever, bitch, you're posting all the time. I am posting as a way to clear my mind out so that I can create more art. Otherwise, this is what I think happened to Axl Rose when he was creating the disastrous album Chinese Democracy, which ended up costing about as much as any other rock album in history. Last I checked, 10 million plus, 13 million even dollars, okay? He sat on it and stewed on it because the wild success of Appetite for Destruction. Then there's expectation. Then there's psychopathy and just a downward spiral. This is why I've often asserted that there's just no way to pay me to do things that I don't want to do. Even like spending time with men. I'm the kind of person where never taken anything of actual value. Couchsurfing was a different situation because I never entered couchsurfing with the intent of kinking with people. That happened by accident because I was feeling the vibe. By the way, I've been trying to do the stats on how likely that level of connection would be repeatedly over several people, and I think the chances are actually really low grab bag. The only answer that I can throw out as a loose hypothesis would be the traits cluster in this context. As in, why are so many rock and roll frontmen handsome? My family member has this theory that ports over to any type of lifestyle that requires extreme risk taking. That would be what I do, backpacking. I've traveled to over 120 countries. Extreme sports, scuba dive. I've broken wingsuit world records doing tandem with a wingsuit world champion. I've drifted with world champions in Dubai. The type of people who risk take to the extreme have to have a level of confidence. My family members' hypothesis is that good looking people, fit people, are more likely to have that confidence than others. If you're talking about extreme sports, that totally is the case, because by definition, if you are a pro athlete, you're in shape, a lot of the times tall, and then handsome comes along for the ride, I guess. These traits cluster, I think. So I had been looking at them as, oh, what's the chance that you would always encounter men that hit all three of the physical attributes that women toss out in various manners as being important? Well, my answer would be, instead of thinking of them as completely independent traits of each other, they probably correlate in certain ways. And the types of men who would be successful as pro athletes have them all in various packages. Well, there's also the psychological aura of somebody who's competent or in risk-taking activities, and that would affect the way you physically view them. This is where I can go down an entire different path on evolutionary biology, psychology, this and okay. And I will turn it into a whole project if I have the opportunity. Okay, I was thinking of also doing colonizing today, but I doubt I have time. Okay, my original plan was to finish this entire rough draft vlog series before the new year, but because I intercepted my creative vlogging energy with a dance cover suddenly, then I have to parse out one more week. All right. As a teaser to colonizing, that'll be the most difficult one to write, because this gets into my identity as an Asian woman, that long-standing question of white men and Asian women. People have delved into it using many different angles. My YouTube feed has recommended so many different sources, and I think in order for me to delve into that, I'll have to take time to understand more. But the teaser would be, Ali Wong has a joke about how she feels so powerful when white men eat her pussy. I'm building on that premise, because her joke is, he's just so vulnerable down there that I could just crush your brains, white man, colonize the colonizer. So, did I feel this way when receiving oral sex? I don't know. Actually, I'll throw out this as a pin note for myself. I felt like Nate Diaz triangling someone with a bloody face, throwing up the middle fingers. That's definitely a concept that I'm going to weave into the one shot. So here's my rough ideas, but I will probably expand on them next week, wrap it all up, then go into actual writing. Last time I addressed comedy as an art form for me, and I'll clarify more. Comedy is an extremely large umbrella art form for me. My definition ranges from you telling one-liners or sexual double entendres in casual conversation all the way up to Hollywood blockbuster movies, comedy specials, stand-up comedy specials. Ryan Reynolds is probably the best example of somebody who's clearly a comedian but has never done stand-up comedy. Deadpool was like his comedy magnum opus, but Deadpool was never a stand-up comedy special. My Slutty Sunday series, my Slutty Sunday vlogging, whatever, this is my Deadpool. This is my artistic expression of comedy. When I explain this, people always think black and white. Okay, you're either nothing or you're Dave Chappelle. But there's so much swath in between. Even someone who's never performed stand-up can still be an internal comedian. As in, if your vein is always you throw jokes, punchlines, more so than the average person, and you're always looking for opportunities to be funny for yourself, that is embodying the comedian's spirit. That's what I am doing. My comedy has always worked well as written pieces since I was young. I have an entire website full of niche comedy written pieces that I self-published when the internet was just starting, HTML style. I'm just continuing on that style, except I back up with some visual components on YouTube, some stylistic components like ASMR narration, but fundamentally, it's still the same thing. It's a written piece that has just added stylistic elements because that's how you present on YouTube or Facebook. But other than that, I think I'm good. Another hour and a half epic, right? Jesus Christ. Maybe that's why Andrew Tate has such a cult following, is that he's still able to release his pieces after being punched in the fucking head. So he's probably the most eloquent CTE sufferer that has been in the zeitgeist. That I will give him credit for, right? I think he's clearly been kicked in the head one too many times. I mean, in fact, his copium has just been so outrageous. He's deferred to God. Apparently, he lost so that he could spend one more minute with his brother Tristan. Sometimes I wonder about these people, dude. While I'm wrapping this up, because I'm in the last minute of my vlog, I'll also give the Tates credit, especially Tristan, for being a handsome-ass man. There's nothing that I can counter to that. The dude's tall, jacked, and handsome. What can I say? Before people accuse me of being a uber-feminist who gives no props to them, they are legitimate combat sports athletes. They were elite level. They're tall, jacked, handsome-ass men. They can speak eloquently for CTE sufferers, but other than that, they have a lot of trash takes regarding women. Okay, and they hide under this Muslim shield. So that is it. It is what it is. Top G out.